أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد وانتشت.
Assalamu alaikum guys, and welcome to the Tarikhology podcast. I'm your host today, Abdul Wahid, and I'm with my co-host as well as my guest on this podcast, Amir Rahman.
Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for having me.
I'm happy to have you today too. So, Aminoor, can you tell me a bit about yourself and the organization?
Sure. So my name is Mohammed Amir Rahman. I was born and raised in London, and I studied predominantly in London. So I went to a normal state school, as the usual kid would do in East London. I went to a private school where I formally started my religious education. I did 10 years at that school where I did the secular studies alongside the bachelor's in Islamic studies.
Right.
Then I went on to do a bachelor's degree at the University of Law. I did my undergraduate there, and then I did further studies at the same university. However, that was recently completed, and I continue my studies in Islam on a day-to-day basis.
So you have quite a bit of an Islamic background.
Yeah.
Can you just give a bit of an example of what you've actually learned or what you enjoy learning about Islam?
Sure. So I started when I was 10. Officially, formally, whatever phrase you want to use, I was around 10 when I started. If we're going to go to the beginning, I was probably 6. When, like most people my age, they go to the mosque and they learn how to read the Quran, the Qa'idah. Everything starts from a young age, right? You have to start learning the script. So that was probably 5, 6. But when I started in school, that was officially when you had like Islamic history, you had Islamic jurisprudence, you had a bunch of different tasks, you had a bunch of different assignments, homework that was given to you. Right. So that's what I count as a formal education. So that was from the ages of 10 till 16, and from 16 to 20 I did the bachelor's degree, the Alimiyah in Islamic studies, and alongside that I did a few other courses at a bunch of different institutions. I was privileged enough to study in the UK. I also went to Turkey, where I studied under a wide variety of shuyukh. I went to the US, right, where I was fortunate enough to study under one of my personal heroes and someone who got me into Islamic history a long time ago. And I went to the Middle East, I went to Saudi and other few countries.
So you can say from a very young age you've had quite a big interest in Islam, and you would say whilst people are playing video games or out playing football and FIFA or whatever, you were there under so many shayukhs and so many teachers learning about Islam. Was there a specific topic exactly you were most interested in?
I mean, growing up, it wasn't usually Islam. Growing up, I was really interested in religion in general. So I basically went through every religion I could come across. I had books on like Shintoism, Taoism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, every ism, schism you could think of. I'm pretty sure I've read a book or done some research into it. So I looked through a wide variety of religions. I went through Judaism, went through Christianity, I came across Islam, and obviously being raised in a Muslim household, I learned more and more. And it got to the point where, the more interest you get in a subject, the more you want to learn about it. And then that just increases you on the journey that you're on. So I just went through all the Islamic sciences and went through the different topics. You have like creed, you have jurisprudence, you have history. My personal favorite was creed. My personal favorite was creed, and then it shifted to history. Right. The biggest reason why creed is interesting, but it can get very technical. History is very wide. Like there's a lot to study. Creed is also very limited in what you can go through, because there were more, in my personal opinion, there were more well-known historians.
Right.
And history is so vast and it's so expansive that there's a lot more to enjoy, in my personal opinion, than studying, for example, creed, which can become very robotic or just technical.
So when it comes to an Islamic historian,
yes,
can you just name one of your favorite historians?
Okay.
Just a single one for
what are we talking about? Like early Islamic history, like medieval, modern?
Let's say early Islamic history.
Okay, so the earliest Islamic history, usually said by most historians, would have been Ibn Ishaq, who died very, very close to the Prophet ﷺ. Within the first 200 to 300 years, he passed away. And what a lot of people would wonder is, how is he early if it was within a couple hundred years.
Right.
Now, when you study the Islamic sciences, you understand the isnad system, which is essentially the system of verifying reports.
So we would commonly call chains, right?
Yeah, a chain of narration is known as an isnad is a chain of narration, and every report has one, and that's how we know that this is what this person said at this place in time. And how we verify historical facts, we check the chain of narration to see, okay, this person said this at this time frame, and they said this happened at this time. Now we would check, was this person here at this place in time? Were they around these group of people, and were they alone, or were there other people there?
Right. So this author, I would say, would that be correct? Or?
Author, yeah, I guess you could say he was one of the first authors. He did have a copy of his Sirah called the Sirah of Ibn Ishaq.
You would say he was the most authentic, maybe because he was closest to the time, or?
Most authentic might not be the best word, because there were historians earlier than him whose books would have been more authentically attributed.
Right.
However, because Ibn Ishaq's work has become so, his work, essentially you had authors prior to him, but how it worked was they weren't that well known, but they were very well known in their own community. So Ibn Ishaq, what he did was he traveled far and wide, and he compiled all of these authors into his own work.
Okay, so you can say he made a compilation book.
Yeah, so he made, yeah, you could say a compilation. So he eventually.
So do you know the name of this book at all?
So there's a very long name, but it's usually translated as the Sirah of Ibn Hisham. So the Sirah comes from the Arabic word Sara. Sara refers to the footsteps of a person. So from Sara you get the word Siratun, and Sirah is essentially the footsteps of the Prophet. Siratun Nabawi, the footsteps of the Prophet.
Right.
Or Siratun Nabawi.
Is there an English translation of the book at all, or is it mostly in Arabic?
There are some translations. There's a very popular translation in English. However, I think that the Arabic is a lot better in terms of the fact that the translation is usually translated.
You get the original meaning, basically.
Yeah, so
and original understanding.
Of course, and obviously Arabic is a language where one word can mean different things depending on the circumstances.
Exactly. There's a complexity to the language.
Exactly.
And you would need to have quite a lot of knowledge.
Of course, Arabic is a Semitic language.
And understand it.
Yeah, precisely. Arabic is a Semitic language. Every word can mean different things depending on the circumstances. And
so
that's it.
Now that we've learned about your favorite author, let's shift the conversation over to Tarikhology itself.
Yes.
Now, Tarikhology, the name is quite unique, I would say. So I will, for the viewers to understand, and for probably me to understand as well, I would like to know, how did you come up with the name?
Okay, so I guess the disclaimer is Tarikhology was not the initial name. When we initially started a couple of years ago, it started under a different name. And that was primarily because that name that I chose, so Al-Ghayah Foundation, was a name that I personally really liked. Now, after working with a wide variety of organizations and other other groups, they suggested to me that we should make our name more focused in order for our viewers and our followers to understand who we are and what we do.
So, what did that name mean? So it was called Al-Ghayah before.
Al-Ghayah Foundation.
Al-Ghayah, right?
Yeah.
So, exactly why did you choose the name Al-Ghayah?
So Ghayah or Ghayatun is essentially like the highest or the best form of something. So Al-Ghayah Foundation referred to the best form of anything you did. So if it was, like, for example, in history, the best forms of history.
Right.
In charity, the best forms of charity.
Right.
In any aspect, it was usually the best.
Right. So you wanted to be like the best form of charity that was there.
Essentially, the best thing about Arabic is the word could mean multiple things depending on how you used it. And obviously, the way I used it, that was one of the meanings. Now we changed to Tarikhology because Tarikhology comes from two words. It comes from the Arabic word tarikh, which means history, and the Greek word for knowledge, which is logos. So logos and history put together would have been the study of history. So logos literally means knowledge, but in a technical sense, it's the study of something. So we've got, for example, psychology. Psychology is the study of the psyche.
Right.
Sociology, the study of society.
Right.
Tarikhology is the study of history. And it's the reason why we chose it with our slogan, as you can see, history simplified, is so that we can simplify historical incidents and matters for our viewers and for the general public.
Right. So, in regards to the aims of the charity and the organization itself, can you give us us and the audience a direction of where the charity wants to go and the organization wants to go?
Of course. So we've got three main aims. So our first is to give da'wah through Islam. Now that could be to a non-Muslim through your usual conversations with this.
So in terms of da'wah for non-Muslim listeners, what does da'wah mean exactly?
That's a good question. So the word da'wah usually refers to a call. So it's essentially you're calling someone to something. Now, when we use it in a technical sense, da'wah is referring to calling a person who does not believe in Islam to Islam.
Right.
And that could be through any medium. You could talk to someone via telephone, via email, social media. We've got avenues possible for us today that we didn't have 1,000 years ago.
Right, because back then it was mostly face-to-face or towards a crowd.
Face-to-face,
Yeah.
You'd usually have a speaker on a platform, like shouting across.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was their form of da'wah, and if that's how it worked, then that was great, I guess. But da'wah is essentially calling someone, in the sense that we're using it, it's calling someone to Islam. And if they're non-Muslim, then obviously it's da'wah. And if we're trying to bring people back to Islam, so for example, they're already Muslim,
Right.
but they have a very lackluster understanding of Islam,
Deviating from.
or they've deviated from the faith, or even if they believe that they're not as close as they probably should be, then we would provide tarbiyah, which is essentially like a reaffirmation, or it's a retraining of Islam onto them. So we would help them rebuild their blocks of Islam so that they build a solid foundation themselves. So we do da'wah through Islam, and that's essentially our first point. That's
Right.
one of our first aims. Our second aim is giving da'wah through history. Now, everything we do, everything we've read online, everything happening now, in the future and in the past, is history. How do you know your ancestors? How do I know my ancestors?
Right.
Primarily because of the fact that we have history. Now there's a lot to learn through history. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions in the Quran, He says, Siru fil ard, like traverse the earth, go through the earth and see how people acted and see the punishments that they faced and I'm summarizing, see how they acted and see the punishments that impacted them because of their actions.
Right.
Those that disbelieved were punished, those that believed were saved and rewarded. So we give da'wah through history.
Right, so it would teach people a lesson basically.
Teach people a lesson.
From their experience.
Of course, we are firm believers that history is a very good source of knowledge. People don't really truly appreciate history unless you actually understand it.
Right.
And what we will have on this podcast and in future actions, we will have historians come and speak about not just history, but the science of history.
Right.
Because we need to understand that everything has a principle. There is a mechanism for everything.
Right.
Now, unless you understand that mechanism, you will never truly appreciate what is going on. So that's essentially da'wah through history. Now the third one would be giving da'wah through experience. So that's essentially us having people on from a wide variety of backgrounds. We'll have people speaking from a wide variety of experiences, and they'll come onto our podcast and speak about things that they've gone through, experiences that they've had, and how we can benefit from that.
Right.
So we'll question them on, for example, their upbringing, what they did, why they did it,
Right.
and we'll ask them, what can you tell us? What would you have done differently? Now, how can our viewers watching this do something differently if they are in your position, or if they would have been in a similar position?
Sure.
And what advice do you have? Because realistically, we want our guests to come and speak on a platform and give advice. Our third aim is da'wah through experience, so giving advice through experience. And we believe that the best form of advice is from someone who's experienced it.
Right, exactly.
So our three key aims to summarize: da'wah through Islam, da'wah through history, and da'wah through experience.
So, in terms of the project, what kind of projects did Tarikhology actually involve themselves in, and what are the key initiatives that they worked on?
Okay, so very briefly, we did quite a few. We did quite a few in terms of when we started up to now. So one of our first big projects was myself and my brother, who couldn't make it today. What we did is we decided we're going to start this and we're going to do what we can. So we pooled some money together and we essentially went and scoured every bookstore you could find in East London. And we got translation copies of the Holy Quran, and we got a bunch of material on Islam from an atheistic point of view, from an Islamic point of view, regarding atheism, regarding Christianity, Jesus, Mary, alayhim assalam. And we compiled that into a small bag, and we essentially went across London and we handed them out in what we call now the Ramadan Homeless Campaign. And we essentially spent the entire month of Ramadan, around a couple of hours before Iftar, we'd go around London. So we went across the different boroughs of London and we handed out a homeless food pack, which contained a da'wah pack, as you can see on camera. These are one of our more later ones, so we've got our own custom packaging and so on and so forth. So we had a da'wah pack, we had some food, and we had a hand sanitizer, a face mask, and yeah, that was one of our first ones.
That sounds like quite a big campaign. 300 dawah packs is quite a lot of people. Did you manage to give it to 300 people?
Yeah, so by the end of it, we handed out over 300. We stopped counting at one point.
Oh, really?
There was really realistically speaking, there was no need. We only counted to see our own personal progress.
Right. Any other campaigns at all?
So we did quite a few recently. So over the past year, we did a fundraising campaign for Save the Children.
Right.
So they're a charity that primarily fundraise and help orphans. Obviously, they work in other avenues, but that's usually their main aim. And we reached out to them, and I proposed to them that in East London, there's not much being done in terms of charity work regarding orphans specifically. So we decided, let's help them out. So I contacted someone there. They were more than happy for us to do that. They provided us with some equipment. They provided us with a lot of gear. They provided us with locations. And we essentially, what we did is we raised money for them so that they could use it. And it was essentially when Afghanistan was going through a crisis.
Right.
There was a natural disaster, and they needed support. So we figured, let's help them out. So we did the Save, Donate and Eat Cake campaign.
Right.
So we essentially got cakes, we sold them, and we raised all the profits towards
how much
campaign.
exactly?
So our final total was just under £500.
Right.
And this was 2 guys with 2 cars across the entire city of London and out. We went as far as Dartford.
Whoa, that is quite a big success for just 2 people. You know, you would expect a group or a large organization to manage something like that, but I'm very surprised and happy to hear that you managed to do £500 with just 2 people and 2 cars.
It was good fun.
So in terms of the demographic of people that you're trying to target, who are you exactly trying to reach?
So in brief, we reach everyone. We produce articles for the educated. We produce YouTube content for the kids. We produce like these podcasts for the teenagers.
Right.
We have content for everyone, and we aim for everyone because we believe that history should not be limited to a certain group or demographic.
So can you explain to us some of the positive impacts that you have made through Tarikhology? One major impact that we've made is we've provided people with a service that a lot of our local community members don't do, unfortunately. We usually focus on ourselves. How do we feed ourselves? So the me, myself and I trend going around. We barely consider the fact that while we're eating here, people maybe even next door are starving, or people down the road, maybe down the road anywhere, people are hungry, and we don't take that into consideration. And this brings to mind a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so this is God Almighty, for someone not unfamiliar with the technical term, He questions His servant saying that, "Oh my slave, I was hungry and you did not feed me." Now, we need to take into consideration, this is the Lord of all worlds. This is the overall ruler, the master, our Lord. Now He's saying, "I was hungry, you did not feed me. I was unclothed, you did not clothe me." And obviously the slave will reply, "Oh my Lord, how can you, being as glorious and magnificent as yourself, require me to clothe you or feed you?" Right.
Now,
you wouldn't expect someone like the Lord to say that he's dependent.
Exactly. He's got everything. He is independent. That's what makes him the Lord.
Exactly.
He is independent of everyone. He does not have a need, but we have needs. That's why he is the Lord and we are his servants.
Right.
And he replies back saying that my servant was in need and you did not help him.
Right.
My servant was unclothed and you did not help him.
So would it be right to say he was pleading on behalf?
Pleading is probably the wrong term. He was showing to us, because this was an allegory that the Prophet used to teach his companions,
Right.
that God Almighty or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put us on this earth
Right.
to look after one another.
Sure.
So that I look out for you, I look out for you, you look out for me, but we all look after each other. And this is the concept of an ummah, of a community, that we are all one big community.
So we know that Tarikhology has done quite a lot of events throughout the months and years it's been running. Can you tell us of some of the success stories? So we have learned about the initiatives and the projects. So some success stories would be very good for the audience to understand.
One of the first ones I mentioned earlier, so we raised just under £500 for Save the Children.
Right.
That was probably one of our most successful, considering the resources and the manpower we had. I'd say it's pretty successful compared to some of the local organisations who maybe didn't do as much. Another success story is also the fact that in this very specific time frame, we handed out dawah packs far and wide. Not only did we hand out Qur'ans, we didn't just hand out religious material, but we handed out necessities. We handed out face masks, hand sanitizer, blankets.
Right.
Because these were people. And ultimately, we come across a lot of people who ask us for money on the streets. They might genuinely be homeless or they might just be begging for money. Now, most people will just shrug them off as begging for money.
Right.
But doing this truly helps you appreciate the value of wealth, as well as understand who's truly in need and who's not. When you do the work that we've been doing long enough, I now understand when someone comes up to me asking for money, I can tell if they're genuinely homeless and if they're not. Someone might ask, how do you know that? Simple, experience. The more you experience it, the easier it gets. And these are just some success stories. We've raised a lot of money. We've given people the bare necessity that they require. Because realistically speaking, how do you expect someone to find the truth if they can't even find the bare necessities themselves?
So what I like about the Tarikhology ethos would be the paying it forward. So what we in Tarikhology usually do is we use our donations and we use it to create these dawah packs, and it pays forward to the next person. So we do encourage Muslims as well as non-Muslims to understand about Islam, or for Muslims specifically to engage in dawah themselves, give these dawah packs like these ones or our fairly older ones from our old events to non-Muslim neighbors, family members. We have seen a lot of reverts who willingly use our dawah packs as a gateway for them to learn about Islam and understand about the Quran. So that is one aspect of the Tarikhology project, ethos, as well as one of the initiatives that we're taking towards spreading Islam, which is fairly lacking. I've never seen anybody actually make dawah packs and give it away, which is fairly unique. I would say we're not a business, but it's a good selling point.
That's true. I mean, if we look at, for example, so this is one of our newer ones. So as the camera can see, as the audience can see, and as you can see as well. So this is fairly new, fairly well designed.
Do you think you can open the box a bit?
Sure, of course. So for yourself to see, and I'll show it to the camera shortly. So the person, whoever opens it, the Muslim or non-Muslim, because people need to understand that our dawah packs are not just for non-Muslims. Everyone can learn about Islam. There might be things in this pack that you don't know. You as the host, there are things that you might not know about Islam that you could obviously learn.
Just for also, if you can explain for our listeners that are not watching the video, just to go flick through them and explain them what exactly is inside the dawah.
Of course, so for those looking live or for those watching the video, I can just briefly show the camera. So we've got Timeless Wisdom, which is essentially a reflection of the Holy Quran. So it just goes through different verses and you hear the recitation, and that's always good for people that enjoy sound. We've got another one which is essentially just a recitation of the Holy Quran, and this is for essentially to help people become closer to Islam through the connection that they have with the Quran. The greater your connection with the Quran, the more you'll eventually want to learn about Islam, and then the likelihood is that you'll accept Islam at a greater pace.
Right.
A lot of that material really include these types of material. A few of the other books that we have include a book regarding some prominent Western scholars on Islam.
Right.
So this would be useful for those living in predominantly Western countries,
Right.
like the United Kingdom, because you'd want to know from a scholarly background what do people say.
Exactly.
Another book for my Christian brethren is a book regarding the life of Jesus, and essentially it would go through him, who he is, and what he does.
Oh, and for the listeners, these books are mainly from IDCI.
IDCI, most of the material, there are a few other books that I'm not going to get into as of now. I guess that's something that you can find if you want to come get one, you'll find out. But our dawah packs have been hand chosen by myself along and with Muslims and non-Muslims. I always trial everything out to see what do people want to know, because look, you could be given 1,000 books, but if none of them interest you, you're not going to read any of them. So these books have been chosen to be the most effective.
So now let's go to the challenges that the Dawah organization as well as the charity is facing. What are some of the main challenges that you are facing today?
One of the biggest challenges for any organization to run is funding. That's like a no-brainer. At the end of the day, especially in this country, money is key. You need money to do anything, even for this podcast. Like these cameras, the mics, the tablecloth, your t-shirt.
I can vouch for quite a lot of this. A lot of these projects are coming out of pocket.
Oh, 100%.
And specifically myself, I have given one of these mics, the one that I'm using,
the brothers
out of pocket. But alhamdulillah, it's going for a good cause. So why not? It would have gone on to maybe food, travel, something else, or something completely unnecessary.
If I can add just a very brief point, is the fact that we spend ridiculous amounts of money.
I can also vouch for that one.
on what? Not just you, we're all guilty of this. We spend a ridiculous amount of money on, like, for example, like the gym, or food, or gaming, or table tennis, or any leisure. You could argue that the gym is good for you, like it's something that you need. But running is free. Like realistically, you could buy weights and just do it at home. If you want to do cardio, run. I'm not saying don't do the gym. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we should proportionate everything. Now, if we're spending, say, £80 a month on a mobile phone contract,
right,
but then we can't afford to buy a translation of the Holy Quran that's like £8, then we need to really check our priorities. Gym is good. It's good for the body. It's good for the soul. Exercise is important. But now, if you're spending £100 a month in the gym, but for example, let's say you have kids that can't read the Quran or don't know Arabic, and you can't afford to send them to an Islamic school or even to the local mosque because your gym membership is expensive or your mobile phone contract is expensive. So where are our priorities? Yeah. How can we expect to thrive as a community if our priorities are buying the latest, the latest video game,
right,
or the latest knitting set?
Yeah, if you're able to, you should try as much as you can to use your wealth in a way that will help you both spiritually, Islamically, as well as helping the general populace in general, basically.
100%. I mean, alhamdulillah, we're all in a position where we live in a country that provides welfare for the people that are on low income.
Right.
So even if you don't earn much, there are plans in place for you to have enough to sustain yourself. Now, how you proportionate that wealth is completely down to you. And at the end of the day, if you've had enough wealth, Allah will question you on what you've done with that wealth. Now, you need to have the cold reality thrown at you, and you need to make the quick decision yourself as to how am I spending my wealth? Am I spending it for the sake of Allah, or am I spending it for the sake of this world and this dunya?
So another, I think, prominent issue we've had from experience, I would say, would be the manpower issue, right?
Of course, 100%. If I'm going to briefly speak about the fact that it's like almost impossible to get people to work or volunteer.
Right.
It's completely understandable. In this country, you work a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday.
I can vouch for that one.
Yeah, of course, exactly. I also did a full-time master's degree, just on the weekends.
Yeah, majority of the team members.
Everyone here has something.
Everyone here literally has something that they're doing, whether it's education, a job, or both,
Or both.
or even three.
Exactly.
Like certain people, a certain person that's sitting next to me.
And you see, it still astounds me that some people still say to me that they have no time, when realistically we all have 24 hours in a day. But then some people will come and say, I have no time. But then they will waste time unnecessarily on other things. Now you need to first think, how do I use my time wisely? If you look at like other interviews with like rich CEOs, they're not sleeping like 10 hours a day. They understand that for their goal to be a success story, they need to put in the effort. Now our goal is for the akhirah. Now we need to understand how much of an effort have we put into that, and we need to be true to ourselves. Are we putting in enough? Because there's 24 hours in a day. We all have the same number of hours. Now why can we do this and we make time?
Right.
But then we have people throwing us excuses that we don't have enough time. Well, I don't have enough time. Everyone has time. Once you get home, you have time to learn about Islam. If not, support da'wah. You can donate, help other people. You could support. Though if you claim not to have time, support those that do.
Exactly.
Realistically, manpower, trying to find people to work on this project has been very difficult, which is why for a good portion of this project, this organization ran on 1 or 2 people.
Right.
Alhamdulillah, now we've got a good team of around 10 people.
Right.
And we've got more manpower. We've also got more of a financial backing. But those issues do arise every now and then.
Now, let's talk about transparency. So we know that when people do give donations, they want to know where their money is going and how it's being spent and where it's going towards. So how does Tarikhology deal with donations, transparency and accountability for these donations?
So that's a good question. So if we just go from the first one, for the first point was transparency. So how does Tarikhology deal with transparency? So all donations go straight to the next project that's upcoming.
Right.
Usually we don't raise enough to cover the entire cost. So or anything that's fundraised will go directly to the bank account. Maybe that same day it'll leave the bank account to pay for the costs of that day, or maybe the cost of an upcoming project. What was the second point?
It would be, so that was transparency. Accountability would be another one.
Accountability. So if you were to ask me, how do we hold us accountable? What standard do we hold ourselves to? Or what I personally do as a CEO is I ask myself, in this time frame, what have we done?
Right.
We've raised X amount of money. What have we done? You have organizations that earn copious amounts of money through donations. Now, you should hold them to account for what they do. Now, if they raise, like let's say a mosque, if they raise a large sum every week, but they don't do anything for the community, then you'd raise questions. Like, that's the mindset I have. That if I'm donating, I expect results to happen.
I would say the one way we try to differentiate ourselves with others would be we show through our social media, through our videos, through our TikToks, our Instagram posts, as well as our YouTube posts, what exactly we're doing. You would see where our stalls are set up. We would announce it beforehand as well, and we'll show you exactly how many books we bought, how many utilities we bought, and exactly compile them together on our dawah stalls, and show you as like a visual aid of where your money is going and how it's being used and who it's being given to and where it's being pulled forward to. For example, the dawah packs would be a very good example how we give them to certain non-Muslims. So each dawah pack that you have given, that has gone towards a non-Muslim or family member of a non-Muslim person, or a revert themselves, so that they can learn about Islam.
That sounds pretty simplified. One last point that I'd add is the fact that when you're donating, or when someone donates money, or when someone asks for donations, they usually never donate themselves. Like when an organization donates, or they'll ask for donations, but whether they donate themselves is down to them. Now what we do is the central team, the core members of the team are all Patreon members.
Right.
So we donate because we believe in this message, and that should be a reassurance to everyone else. And we are spending our own money. Some of us earn good money, some of us don't. We've got a brother who's unemployed. He's been looking for work, can't find it. Now,
right. It's tough out there.
It's tough out there. We have to acknowledge that. but he's still part of the Patreon.
Exactly.
Now, why? This is the question that everyone should think of. Why? It's because we believe in this message. We believe that what's happening is for the greater good. And we believe that all work is rewarded by Allah. And yeah, that's it.
So in terms of fundraising methods, what are some of the ways that we fundraise, and what differentiates us from other dawah organizations or charities?
I'll answer the second point first. So what makes us different is the fact that we work on like a grassroots, a local level. So we work more with people. We don't have large campaigns. We don't go to different locations with big teams. We do it on a more personal note. We contact businesses. We try and get involved with other businesses, small businesses, to work with them. Right. So that way we reach out to the community on a greater scale. And how we raise money? Or
how exactly do we raise money? I know we usually take donations.
Yeah, so at events, if someone's generous enough to donate towards the Dawah Pack, then they can donate.
Yeah.
We also have a Patreon where people can choose to donate monthly. It's a small amount, and these monthly donations go towards the pool and go towards the work. And yeah.
So in terms of the core team, so can you explain a little bit about them, who they are, what impact they had in the organization, and the work they do for Tarikhology?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I won't get into too much detail, but we've got yourself.
Yeah.
You. I've known you for a long time.
Yeah.
We go back quite a while, and your role, as well as everyone else's role in this organization, is equally as important.
Right.
The difference between the central team and everyone else is the fact that everyone in the central team has an impact on the organization.
Right.
Now, something that you do or something that, for example, one of the other brothers does, it will have an impact in how we do things. It's a brief
So in terms of the way I found Tarikhology, so you were having the summer festival in East London Mosque?
Yes.
Was that what it was? I think you sent me a text on that day saying, "Oh, Abdul Wahid, do you think you can come over?" I thought about it, and then I was like, you know what, why not? So then I remember I got, I think Brother Adil was there, Brother Majid was there, and Brother Shabazz was there as well, and of course you, in your show, in looking like the Sheikh from Saudi Arabia, and you gave me the opportunity to actually try it out. So I thought, you know what? Why not? Let me stand on that podium and see how it works. And I found out I really enjoyed it. I'm not gonna lie, it was really good. Talking to people, you know, they used to get this camaraderie with other brothers coming in and seeing the work that you're doing and appreciating the impact you're having to the community on a local level, even though it's not on a, you would expect people to have like such a large scale impact. But we're doing something that's on a local level, and there's an appreciation to it. I'm not saying I did it for the appreciation, but I did it because I really enjoyed the aspect of doing charity and da'wah. So I would say you were the gateway towards me actually doing that.
Well, I appreciate the sentiment. See, a lot of people don't realize that da'wah is enjoyable, but people have never either tried it, or they're too scared to do it, or maybe they're just too ignorant to do it. But once you get into it, it's enjoyable. It's good. It's fun as well as enjoyable and spiritually uplifting.
So let's get to the crux of this podcast as well. So why did we create this podcast? So it has a certain purpose that we want to, as well as the structure. So I would say like the reasons. Why don't you explain it? What are the reasons behind the podcast?
So like any other podcast, we're here to provide a service, and that service is education for 3 aims that we mentioned earlier. So it's essentially to give da'wah through Islam, history and experience, as mentioned earlier. And the others are our values, which is to connect with humanity, make a positive change, and bring people together, bring communities together. Now, what we aim to do on this podcast is to have a wide variety of speakers from different dispositions, from different backgrounds, different experiences, come and tell us about themselves, their experiences. And if we have academics like historians on the podcast, they'll address key topics, key issues that aren't usually covered on a general podcast. Nowadays you have podcasts speaking about, I don't know, like you have podcasts for comedy, you have podcasts on like dating, you even have podcasts on just food.
Yeah, or general news.
Or general news.
It's quite wide in terms of
Yeah. So we figured, why don't we do a podcast for the people to understand and truly appreciate, as our slogan says, history in a simplified manner.
In terms of collaborations, we have done quite a few collaborations with certain organizations and events. I would say let's start. Let's focus on two of the main ones we did with, I believe, Al-Kawthar, as well as was it Samir Travel?
Save the Children.
Save the Children,
Save
yeah.
the Children.
As well as the other one we did with.
So Samir Treasures.
Yeah, Samir Treasures. That's what.
So the brothers referring to two of our recent events. So we did one with Al-Kawthar London. He runs his own thawb business, which is an amazing business. And also Samir Treasures, who focuses more on the female modest attire, which is also amazing. I'd highly recommend you check that out. And our one, as I mentioned earlier, Save the Children is like our biggest collaborator. Like they still email me, even though we did the fundraising campaign like 3 years ago. They still email me every so often saying, we need your support, we need your help. Because they realized that we bring good to the community.
Right.
Like we can do only so much. And that's part of the reason why we fundraise, because our resources are limited. But the more we fundraise, the more we can do.
So, do you want to announce to the audience about any upcoming events or campaigns that they can participate in?
So, other than this podcast, which I highly recommend everyone watch, we'll try and do as often as we can. We'll have speakers from different disciplines. Our aim soon, within the upcoming future, is to launch a dawah stall in East London. You've got a few. We went to, it was myself and you when we went to Stratford.
Oh yeah, that was a very interesting experience.
Yeah, you and I, we were walking, we were walking Westfield.
We were in Stratford, I believe. After you parked your car, we went up the bridge and down the stairs.
Okay.
And then out of nowhere towards the station, we met a brother that we met in the Summer Souk event from Brixton Mosque.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah. He was a revert who I did not. I'll tell you. I did not expect to see him. He was probably the most biggest miracle to see him, because I thought the last time we saw him would be the first and last. But Alhamdulillah, he was with certain.
He was with other dawah like tables that were there.
Yeah.
So he had quite a few, and we were walking and we saw him. He recognized us. And I don't know what happened, but within like 5 minutes, I had a mic on and I was just talking.
And the YouTube channel was called.
It was Sam Dawah.
Sam Dawah, yeah.
The brother does excellent work. I'd highly recommend you check his YouTube channel out. And we had a discussion with him. He gave me a mic. I was just talking for a while,
which was a very surreal experience.
It's very surreal.
You would think there was a lot of it was in a qadr to meet this person. I would say.
Definitely. Now that's just something that we done recently.
So we're going to be close to wrapping up. When it comes to our listeners, how can they help aid Tarikhology in its cause?
There's a few ways that they can do, and we'll start with the easiest way. The easiest way is to listen to this podcast. Not only listen, but share it to someone that you might think is interested, also someone that might not be interested. At the end of the day, if this podcast helps them draw closer to Islam or to Allah, then they would have benefited. And if you share it, and you never know that this one podcast brought them closer, you'll be rewarded on the Day of Judgment anyway. So listen to the podcast, like it, share it, so that it reaches more people. Other avenues, follow our other social media. So we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, and we're also on TikTok. And maybe other social media platforms will follow in the long run.
And in terms of this podcast, it will probably be on quite a lot of platforms, YouTube, Spotify. We'll try our best to get it there. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We'll try and make the reach as far as possible with the people and ability we have right now. So we'll try our best to try and reach as many people as we can on as many different platforms. So I would like to wrap it up by saying thank you, Aminoor Rahman, CEO of Tarikhology, and thank you to the listeners for listening to this podcast. We do apologize for we do apologize for any issues that you do hear. We are new to this, and we are happy to continue this podcast as long as people are willing to hear. Even if you're not willing to hear, we would like to hear any comments that you can give towards our podcast to make it sound better and be better. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum, Aminoor here. Thank you all for watching our podcast, and we really appreciate you being part of our journey. We apologize for any shortcomings in any of our work, and inshallah we aim to see you in the next one. Assalamu alaikum.
أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد وانتشت